Cascadia Empowered is, in my opinion, one of the best arcanes they've ever added into the game. But why? First of all, Cascadia Empowered can be acquired from Thrax Centurions and Thrax Legacies at a rate of 1 in every 300 kills, roughly, and it also drops from Void Angels at a rate of roughly about 1 in 60. That is not great, but luckily you can also buy it from Cavalero if you're the rank of Guardian or higher for 7,500 standing a pop. Alternatively, you can buy it from other players using Platinum, and at the time of recording of the video, it's not too expensive, and a full set will set you back about 50 Platinum. So now that we know how to get it, what does it actually do? Well, it's pretty simple. It makes your status effects do damage, up to 750 damage at maximum rank, with the damage matching the type of element that triggered it. Meaning, if you proc corrosive on the enemy and you have Cascadia Empowered, you will also do 750 flat corrosive damage. This immediately cuts the number of weapons that can effectively and efficiently use this arcane by quite a lot. Because if you want to utilize this arcane, you need a weapon that has good effective status chance. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you need a good combination of status chance, fire rate, and multi-shot. Because simply having high status chance is not enough, since the base damage on Empowered is fairly low and it's not scaled by too many things. Though having high status chance, even going over 100%, is beneficial here, because Empowered can trigger from multiple status effects at once. So if you push your weapon up to 200% status chance, every single shot is going to be triggering 2 instances of Empowered. This is then scaled multiplicatively through multi-shot, because if you start firing 2 bullets, each of those bullets is going to be triggering 2, so you're going to end up with 4. And this is then scaled multiplicatively through fire rate as well, because if you're firing twice as fast, yada yada yada. Now, there are ways to increase the damage of Empowered as well. You can do this with faction mods and by making the enemies vulnerable, like using Caliban's Sentient Wrath, which makes the enemies take more damage. That is pretty much it though, because Empowered can't crit, it's not affected by normal mods, and it's not even affected by Warframe buffs, so you can't use something like Eclipse either. So it's a relatively niche arcane that requires a bit of thought. You can't just slap it on and expect big damage. Now, what kind of weapons are actually good with Cascadia Empowered? Well, actually, any secondary that's a good status primer, because it demands the same sort of criteria, right? Proccing a lot of status, very fast, ideally in an area rather than on a single target. Area of effect weapons are particularly good with Empowered because it doesn't care about fall off, so if an enemy is caught at the edge of the explosion, where normally they would take significantly reduced damage from the weapon itself, they still take the full amount from Empowered. But single target weapons work fine too. Some examples of weapons that work really well here would be the Pox, Nucor, Kuva Nucor specifically, Tenet Cyclone, Zakti Prime is another good one, and the list goes on and on. As I've said already, any weapon that has high effective status chance is gonna work. It is kind of, I don't want to use the word wasted, but wasted on crit weapons or hybrid weapons, since Empowered can't crit. I actually tend to avoid it on crit weapons, because adding in crit mods doesn't just not do anything for Empowered, it actually makes it worse because you have less space for status-based mods. Now, there are kind of like two main ways of utilizing Empowered in build. You can either have it supplement your weapon's damage, or you can have it as the main source of your weapon's damage. The way I generally look at it is, if the weapon has really bad base damage, I will make Empowered do all the heavy lifting and then build the weapon around supporting Empowered, and if the weapon can actually do decent damage on its own, I will use Empowered as supplemental damage. And it's important to decide which one of these two you want to do, because they require a different build. If you want Empowered to be your main source of damage, you don't care about damage on the weapon itself, you just want to crank up the status chance, fire rate, and multi-shot. But if you want the damage from it to be more supplemental, you need a more traditional build, since it's the weapon that's going to be doing the majority of the damage, and then Cascadia Empowered is just going to be adding in a little bit on the side. I generally don't use Cascadia Empowered to do supplemental damage unless the weapon is not affected by Condition Overload, because if it is and you can scale it through Galvanized Shot, you're much better off with Secondary Encumber, which is going to provide more random status effects which will add a ton of damage through Condition Overload. With that being said though, Secondary Encumber is significantly more difficult to get, and as a result of that, far more expensive. So if you don't have Cucumber, Empowered might be a good substitute. And finally, as with most damage in Warframe, it's very important to strip away enemy armor if you're fighting armored factions. Luckily, since Empowered setups are really good at proccing status, all you need to do is put on corrosive damage and then run Emerald Charge to get full armor strip from corrosion alone. And that's pretty much it, so hopefully you now understand Cascadia Empowered a little bit better and you will start using it in your own builds. It's not the strongest arcane ever made and its uses are relatively niche, but it is very, very good in the right setup. My favorite thing about Empowered is that it allows weapons that are mediocre at the best of times to actually be viable in Steel Path. The Accurate is anything but mediocre, but if you put on a pure Toxin Empowered setup on it, suddenly you can do Corpus Steel Path, because every dart gets that 750 damage, which, because it's coming from a Toxin proc, is pure Toxin, meaning it will fly straight through Corpus shields and shred them. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say, so I thank you very much for watching as always guys, and if there is anything else you would like to add to this, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. Then I would also like to extend a special thank you to all the channel members. Thank you very much guys, I really appreciate your support, it means a lot to me, and if you would like to become a channel member as well, by the way, you can check out the memberships and stuff down below. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.